Okay, the next sutta is important sutta. It's the first sutta that the Buddha spoke in the world. It's called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. Dhammacakka is Dhamma wheel. Pavattana must be setting in motion or turning the Dhamma wheel sutta. Thus have I heard. This is the sutta. After the Buddha was enlightened, he contemplated. At first he didn't want to teach the Dhamma. He decided that all people in the world are not interested in the Dhamma. And even if you teach them, they're not interested to practice. Most people are like that. And then this Brahma Sahampati came to plead with the Buddha. This Brahma Sahampati, in one of the suttas, he mentioned that he was a monk under the previous Buddha, Kassapa. He was a monk under the previous Buddha Kassapa, and passing away from there, he was reborn as Brahma Sahampati. So he had, because of his, his psychic power, probably he had seen a lot of holy men. So when he saw the Buddha, he knew that this was fully enlightened Arahant. So he pleaded with the Buddha to teach. He said, otherwise, there are a lot of people in the world, they have what we call shinkan, good roots, blessings from the past life, and if you don't teach them, they can't progress. So because he pleaded with the Buddha 3 times, then the Buddha contemplated again. The Buddha found there are some people who are interested in the Dhamma. So the Buddha decided to teach. Now after the Buddha decided to teach, he looked around, whom should he teach? The first person he thought he wanted to teach was his meditation teacher, the teacher who taught him the jhanas, the arupa jhanas. The first 2 teachers, in fact, he wanted to teach them. Why? Because he thought to himself, these 2 teachers, they have attained jhanas, so their mind is very clear. If I teach them the Dhamma, they will understand immediately. But unfortunately, the 2 teachers had passed on. Then why didn't he go to heaven to teach them? Because they had passed away to a very high heaven, and the physical body cannot go there. The physical body can only fly up to the Brahma heavens. That's the maximum. Cannot fly to the Arupa heavens, are extremely far away. So then after he realized that he had passed away, and then he contemplated whom should he teach next. And he thought about his 5 disciples. So he came to his 5 disciples to teach to them. At first they did not accept him because they thought that he started to eat. Previously they were all fasting, and now he started to eat, getting luxurious. They couldn't believe that he had become enlightened. Then he managed to convince them. Then after that, when he taught them the Dhamma, he just asked them to sit down. He said, sit down, I will teach you the Dhamma. Never asked them to meditate, Listening to the Dhamma is the way to enlightenment. But of course, because the 5 disciples, being his disciples, and he had attained jhana, it is logical to presume he would have taught all his 5 disciples the jhanas. So they sat down, and this is the first sutta he taught. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana. There the Blessed One addressed the monks of the group of 5 thus: monks, these 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness, but 2, the pursuit of sensual happiness in sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the world of worldlings, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. Without veering towards either of these 2 extremes, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle way, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. Stop here for a moment. So the Buddha is saying that there are 2 extremes in this world. One extreme is the extreme of ordinary worldlings who pursue sensual pleasures, keep on enjoying sensual pleasures, which is unbeneficial. The other extreme is the extreme of the ascetics who practice self-mortification. What in Chinese we call ku sing, ascetic practices, which they kind of torture themselves, go naked, do things like hold one hand up for years on end until the hand becomes stiff, or other ways of torturing themselves. So one extreme is to enjoy too much. The other extreme is to torture yourself for no good purpose. And what monks is the middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which leads to Nibbana. It is this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right thoughts, right speech, right actions, right livelihood, right effort, right recollection, right concentration. This monks is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. Now this monks is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering, union with what is displeasing is suffering, separation from what is pleasing is suffering, not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregates of attachment are suffering. These 5 aggregates are the body, feelings, perception, volition and consciousness, which is basically body and mind. So this that we take as to be the self, the body and the mind, and which we attach to, we cling to, is the source of suffering. Now this monks is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there, that is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence, or here it says extermination. Stop here for a moment. So the origin of suffering is craving. And this craving, we always want to seek happiness, enjoyment here and there. You see this seeking delight here and there. It's very common among worldly people. You go here and there looking for happiness, looking for enjoyment. Sometimes you go and see the show, sometimes you go and surf the internet, sometimes you go traveling to China, sometimes you do this and you do that, and all these trying to find happiness. Now this monks is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. Now this, monks, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action, etc. This is the noble truth of suffering. Thus, monks, in regard to things unheard of before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This noble truth of suffering is to be fully understood. Thus, monks, in regard to things unheard of before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This noble truth of suffering has been fully understood. Thus, monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. I'll stop here for a moment. So you see, this first noble truth is described in 3 phases. The first one is he describes it as the noble truth of suffering. The second paragraph, it says this noble truth of suffering is to be understood. And the third one has been fully understood. Now you find the others also the same. This is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. Thus, monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This noble truth of the origin of suffering is to be abandoned. Thus, monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This noble truth of the origin of suffering has been abandoned. Thus, monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. Stop here for a moment. So this second noble truth, first he states the second noble truth. Then he says, this second noble truth is the origin of suffering, namely craving. And craving is to be abandoned. And thirdly, he says, craving has been abandoned. This is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. Thus, monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This noble truth of the cessation of suffering is to be realized. Thus monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This noble truth of the cessation of suffering has been realized. Thus monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This third truth of the cessation of suffering is the giving up of craving. So this noble truth of the cessation of suffering can also said to be the attainment of Nibbana. So here he says that he has realized the cessation of suffering. This noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. These monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering is to be developed. That means the Noble Eightfold Path is to be developed. Thus monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. This noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering has been developed. Thus monks, in regard to things unheard before, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. Stop here for a moment. You see, when the Buddha attained enlightenment, when he realized fully these four noble truths, you see what happened? He rose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge and light. Light shone from his head. Actually, these four noble truths he had understood before. In the previous life, he was a monk disciple of the Buddha Kassapa. He already learned the four noble truths, but he had not fully understood it. Now, in his last life as Siddhartha Gautama, having attained the four jhanas, and then when he contemplated on the four noble truths, he understood fully. In the previous life under the Buddha Kassapa, I believe he did not attain the four jhanas. He attained one jhana. That's why after that lifetime under the Buddha Kassapa, he was reborn in the Tusita heaven. From the Tusita heaven, he came down to the earth as Siddhartha Gautama. And as a small boy, Siddhartha Gautama sat under the Jambu tree and attained the first jhana. It's mentioned that he attained only the first jhana. So that means he probably had already cultivated only the first jhana, not anything higher. So if he had only attained the first jhana, this understanding of the four noble truths is not, as we read, not of swift wisdom, not of joyous wisdom. So he probably, in the previous life under Buddha Kassapa, he had become a Sakadagamin, second fruit attainer. So when he came back as Siddhartha Gautama, it was time for him to attain enlightenment. So that's how, even though he had such a good life, he gave up everything and went forth to renounce everything. So long, monks, as my knowledge and vision of these four noble truths as they really are in the 3 phases and 12 aspects was not thoroughly purified in this way, I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with its devas, Mara and Brahma, in this generation with its ascetics and Brahmins, its devas and humans. But when my knowledge and vision of these four noble truths as they really are in the 3 phases and 12 aspects was thoroughly purified in this way, then I claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world with its devas, Mara and Brahma, in this generation with its ascetics and Brahmins, its devas and humans. The knowledge and vision arose in me. Unshakable is the liberation of my mind. This is my last birth. Now there is no more renewed existence. This is what the Blessed One said. Elated, the monks of the group of 5 delighted in the Blessed One's statement. And while this discourse was being spoken, there arose in the Venerable Kondanya the dust-free, stainless vision of the Dhamma. Whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. And when the wheel of the Dhamma had been set in motion by the Blessed One, the earth-dwelling devas raised a cry. At Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatana, this unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or by anyone in the world. Having heard the cry of the earth-dwelling devas, the devas of the realm of the four great kings raised a cry. The same thing they said, at Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana, this unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma, or by anyone in the world. Having heard the cry of the Devas of the realm of the four great kings, the Tavatimsa Devas raised the same cry, followed by the Yama Devas, then the Tusita Devas, then the Nimanarati Devas, then the Paranimitta Vasavati Devas, up to the Devas of the Brahma's company. They raised the same cry, namely, at Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana, this unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Blessed One, which cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma, or by anyone in the world. Thus at that moment, at that instant, at that second, the cry spread as far as the Brahma world, and this 10,000-fold world system shook, quaked and trembled, and an immeasurable glorious radiance appeared in the world, surpassing the divine majesty of the Devas. Then the Blessed One uttered this inspired utterance, Kondanya has indeed understood. Kondanya has indeed understood. In this way, the Venerable Kondanya acquired the name, Anya Kondanya, Kondanya who has understood. That's the end of the sutta. So you see, when the Buddha gave the discourse, out of 5 monks, only one happened to understand and attain the vision of the Dhamma, that means attain stream entry. The others, it took a few more suttas, they heard a few more suttas before they attained, all of them attained enlightenment. But you see, when the Buddha set in motion this turned the Dhamma wheel, these devas, they were happy, and they shouted so loud. And one realm after another, they shouted the same thing up to the Brahma heavens. Why were they so happy? Because many of them must have been monks before, monks and nuns in the previous life. That's why they are reborn in the heavens. This is Indian belief. If you become a monk or a nun, it's natural that you be reborn in the heaven as a deva or a devi. Okay, the next sutta, 56.21. That's on page 1852. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling among the Vajrayans at Kotigama. There the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, Monks, it is because of not understanding and not penetrating the 4 noble truths that you and I have roamed and wandered through this long course of samsara. What for? It is, monks, because of not understanding and not penetrating the noble truth of suffering that you and I have roamed and wandered through this long course of samsara. It is because of not understanding and not penetrating the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering, that you and I have roamed and wandered through this long course of samsara. That noble truth of suffering, monks, has been understood and penetrated. That noble truth of the origin of suffering has been understood and penetrated. That noble truth of the cessation of suffering has been understood and penetrated. That noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering has been understood and penetrated. Craving for existence has been cut off. The conduit to existence has been destroyed. Now there is no more renewed existence. This is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said, because of not seeing as they are, the 4 noble truths, we have wandered through the long course in the various kinds of births. Now these truths have been seen. The conduit to existence is severed. Cut off is the root of suffering. Now there is no more renewed existence. That's the end of the sutta. So it's because of not meeting and understanding the 4 noble truths that all of us have been turning in the samsara lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Now we are very lucky that we have met the true Dhamma, so we should take this opportunity to really study and understand the Buddha's words so that at least we attain stream entry and we will not be reborn in the woeful planes of existence again. And if you are not born in the woeful planes of existence, then there's not much suffering left. So you can take a slow boat out of samsara. There's one thing I want to mention here. The Buddha says the craving for existence has been cut off. Earlier, in the sutta, we read about the 3 types of craving. Craving is the root of suffering. The cause of suffering is craving. And it was mentioned earlier in the sutta that there are 3 types of craving. Craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence. Craving for sensual pleasures, I think most of us, we understand. We crave for worldly happiness, worldly enjoyment. That's why we want to seek delight here and there, going here, going there, always looking for enjoyment. Then the second one is craving for existence. This is the will to live. The will to live is very strong. That's why when we are dying, most people refuse to let go. So we cling on. Our willpower, our mind is very strong. So the body is breaking up and giving us a lot of suffering. But because our willpower is so strong, we keep clinging. Even though we suffer, also we bear. We keep clinging for many days until it becomes quite torture. And too many days you can't stand it, because all of us we have a threshold of pain beyond a certain limit. We don't want to stand it anymore. Then only we let go. When we let go of the will to live, then only we go for rebirth. So the second condition for the origin of suffering is this craving for existence. The third one is a bit harder for many people to understand. Craving for non-existence. Why is it craving for non-existence will bring you to rebirth, to suffer? This craving for non-existence, there are 2 types. One is like a person experiences a lot of dukkha. Say for example, his business collapses because of recession, becomes a bankrupt. So some people commit suicide. They want to die. They want to exterminate themselves. But at the moment of dying, their mind is very agitated. Their greed, hatred and delusion is still very strong. So when they die with that kind of mind, and the will, even though they think they don't want to live, but actually they're still clinging to life. I know of somebody who tried to commit suicide. He tried many times to commit suicide. He could not succeed. So eventually one day he went to a mining pond, a deep mining pond, jumped into the mining pond. He started to drown. When he was starting to drown, the water starting to swallow the water. Then he panicked. Then he swam out of the pond. So then you see, even though initially he thought he wants to commit suicide, but when he's actually dying, then he realizes, I want to live. Then he swam out of the pond. So a lot of people like that. We, because of delusion, we think we want to die, but actually the will to live is very strong. So there is one type of person who commits suicide. Another type of person in this category, craving for non-existence, is the ascetic. The holy man who is practicing to get out of samsara. The desire is so strong that he practices with too much effort. He goes through all kinds of ascetic practices, like the Buddha. Becomes a naked ascetic, lives in the deep forest only on fallen fruits and on the roots and all that. He suffers so much because of the extreme desire to get out of samsara. So he cannot get out of samsara. You remember the first sutta we read in this Samyutta Nikaya? There was the first sutta. What did he say? When I stood still, I sang. When I strove too hard, I was whirled around. So without standing still, without striving, I crossed the flood. The middle path. No effort, you will sing. Too much effort, you get whirled around. So in the case of this ascetic, he got too much effort. He put too much effort. So when a person puts too much effort, this ascetic, his mind is extremely agitated. So when he's agitated, the mind is agitated. He cannot attain nibbana, because nibbana is a cool state. The mind is cool. So like a Westerner would say, I have to play it cool. Okay, now the next sutta, 56.23. At Savatthi, the Buddha said, monks, there are these four noble truths. What four? The noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the way, of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is because he has fully awakened to these four noble truths as they really are, that the Tathagata is called the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, Sacca-samyutta. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So this sutta says that an Arahant, a Sacca-samyutta, attains enlightenment because of fully understanding the Four Noble Truths. So of all the Dhammas taught by the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths are the most important truths. So to attain enlightenment, you must understand fully the Four Noble Truths. 56.24 at Savatthi. Monks, whatever Arahants, Sammasambuddhas in the past fully awakened to things as they really are, all fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. Whatever Arahants, Sammasambuddhas in the future will fully awaken to things as they really are, all will fully awaken to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. Whatever Arahants, Sammasambuddhas at present have fully awakened to things as they really are, all have fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. What for? The noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Whatever Arahants, Sammasambuddhas, fully awakened ones, will fully awaken, have fully awakened to things as they really are. All have fully awakened to these Four Noble Truths as they really are. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So this sutta also says that all Buddhas and all Arahants, whether past, present or future, all become enlightened because of understanding the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are extremely important. But understanding of the Four Noble Truths are at different levels. A person who understands at a low level will attain a low attainment, will have a low attainment. Someone who understands at the intermediate stage will have an intermediate attainment. One who understands fully, completely, becomes fully enlightened or liberated. But if you look at the Mahayana books, they like to belittle the Four Noble Truths, the dependent origination, 12 links of dependent origination and all that, and saying this is like primary school. But this is not what the Buddha says. The Buddha says it is the most important Dhamma. 56.29. Monks, there are these Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. These are the Four Noble Truths. Of these Four Noble Truths, monks, there is a noble truth that is to be fully understood. There is a noble truth that is to be abandoned. There is a noble truth that is to be realized. There is a noble truth that is to be developed. And what, monks, is the noble truth that is to be fully understood? The noble truth of suffering is to be fully understood. The noble truth of the origin of suffering is to be abandoned. The noble truth of the cessation of suffering is to be realized. The noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering is to be developed. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha says that the noble truth of suffering is to be understood. So we have to understand suffering. Now to understand suffering, we have to know where suffering comes from. And we know suffering comes from attachment to our five aggregates. And also you can say there is suffering because we have a self. We have an identity view. We have this conceit, I am or I exist. So all this is a tangle, is what we call pasikat, like a string, all connected, all tied up. So we have to unravel this slowly. So we have to understand from learning the Dhamma. First we learn the theory. And we learn the theory from the Dhamma, then we practice meditation to sharpen our mind. When we sharpen our mind, then we see things more clearly. So these two things we develop at the same time. As we meditate, we learn the Dhamma. As we meditate, we learn the Dhamma, and we keep progressing in this way. These are the two cornerstones of the holy life. Learning the original Dhamma of the Buddha, and practicing samatha meditation. In fact, in the Buddha's teachings, there's only one meditation, that is samatha meditation. The practice of vipassana is in a way not meditation, it is called contemplation. Contemplation means listening to the Dhamma and contemplating the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma. So to understand this noble truth of suffering, we have to learn from the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, things like the 5 aggregates, things like the 6 sense bases, things like dependent origination, things like the 4 elements, all these. And then the noble truth of the origin of suffering is to be abandoned. The origin of suffering is craving. So craving has to be abandoned. But for craving to be abandoned, it's not so easy. Firstly, you have to see, realize that craving is the source of suffering. And then even though you know craving is the source of suffering, if your mind is not strong, you cannot let go. A lot of things we know is wrong, but we cannot let go. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So we have to make our mind strong by meditation, and then only we can let go of this craving. And then the noble truth of the cessation of suffering is to be realized. That means nibbana, letting go of greed, hatred and delusion. That is a long process. And then the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering is to develop. The Noble Eightfold Path is to develop. And in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 117, it says that the Noble Eightfold Path is to be developed one by one. The factors are starting with right view. First, you must get right view from studying the Buddha's words, and then right view will bring you to practice right speech. And right speech will bring you to right action, and right action will bring you to right livelihood. Right livelihood will bring you to right effort, right recollection, right concentration. That's how the Noble Eightfold Path is to be practiced, is to be developed. And the most important thing to understand is that to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, to develop the Noble Eightfold Path, you must always start with right view. You don't start with right view, you have not entered the Noble Eightfold Path. The next sutta is 56.30. On one occasion, a number of elder monks were dwelling among the Chetiyans at Sahajati. On that occasion, when the elder monks had returned from their alms round, after their meal, they had assembled in the pavilion and were sitting together when this conversation arose. Friend, does one who sees suffering also see the origin of suffering, also see the cessation of suffering, also see the way leading to the cessation of suffering? In other words, if you see the first noble truth, can you also see all the others, other 3? When this was said, the Venerable Gavampati said to the elder monks, Friends, in the presence of the Blessed One, I have heard and learned this. Monks, one who sees suffering also sees the origin of suffering, also sees the cessation of suffering, also sees the way leading to the cessation of suffering. One who sees the origin of suffering also sees suffering, also sees the cessation of suffering, also sees the way leading to the cessation of suffering. One who sees the cessation of suffering also sees suffering, also sees the origin of suffering, also sees the way leading to the cessation of suffering. One who sees the way leading to the cessation of suffering also sees suffering, also sees the origin of suffering, also sees the cessation of suffering. In other words, the Buddha says, if you fully understand one noble truth, you will understand all the other noble truths. The next sutta is an interesting and important sutta. 56.31. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Kosambi in a Singsapa grove. Singsapa is a kind of tree. Then the Blessed One took up a few Singsapa leaves in his hand and addressed the monks thus. What do you think, monks? Which is more numerous, these few Singsapa leaves that I have taken up in my hand, or those in the Singsapa grove overhead? In other words, these leaves in my hand, are they more or the leaves in the forest? And they said, Venerable Sir, the Singsapa leaves that the Blessed One has taken up in his hand are few, but those in the Singsapa grove overhead are numerous. And the Buddha said, so too, monks, the things I have directly known but have not taught you are numerous, while the things I have taught you are few. And why, monks, have I not taught those many things? Because they are unbeneficial, irrelevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and do not lead to revulsion, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Therefore I have not taught them. And what, monks, have I taught? I have taught this is suffering. I have taught this is the origin of suffering. I have taught this is the cessation of suffering. I have taught this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And why, monks, have I taught this? Because this is beneficial, relevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and leads to revulsion, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Therefore I have taught this. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So this is a well-known sutta where the Buddha held the leaves in his hand and said that the things that he has taught us are very little compared to the things that he knows. He knows a lot of things about this world that scientists would like to know, but they are not no real benefit in the holy life. That's why he does not want to say all these things. What he says, he teaches us is the way out of suffering. Okay, it's another night. I've gone over the time.